Thank you for allowing me to accompany you.
It's not what I would have planned for your first mission.
I'm ready.
And maybe so, but we need backup.
Is it Yod?
What's wrong with Yod?
Nothing. No, he's Yod.
Master Soul, I thank you for choosing me for this mission. I should have brought Osha in myself. I apologize for my error.
We leave in 5 minutes.
I will redeem myself.
Yod, put your clothes on.
Masters and Padawans to episode 550 of Full of Sith. It's me, Brian Young, with a very special episode for you. Unfortunately, Holly wasn't able to be with me for this interview. She was at San Diego Comic-Con this weekend. Lots of cool stuff, Star Wars-wise, over the weekend got announced for San Diego Comic-Con. I'm sure we'll be talking about that sooner than later on the show. But I had the opportunity to do an interview with Jennifer Bryan, the costume designer for the Acolyte. And it was a really terrific conversation, and we had a lot of fun. And, I hope you enjoy the conversation. So without further ado, here it is. So thank you so much for talking with me. I wanted to start just by asking how you got roped into Star Wars, given your credits before this. It didn't necessarily look like an obvious match.
No. So to this day, I have asked Leslie Headland, I went, so how did you hear about me? And she just looks at me and laughs and goes, not telling you. But what was wonderful about it is that, somehow my name, what I understand is that my name kept coming up to her, in the list of candidates to be the costume designer for the show. And I believe that one of the things that attracted her to me and my approach to the show was that I wasn't steeped in the iconography and the canon of Star Wars. So, and she's also from contemporary television, like I am. And so the idea of having a somewhat fresh mind creatively, I believe appealed to her, because I was like, oh my God, I know about Star Wars, like the average person, seen the movies, seen the TV shows, but I couldn't, historically, I was not, that well educated. But I'm a quick study, and so here I am. There I was.
As you're stepping into the world of the Acolyte, because it is so far removed from everything else we've seen on either side of it, what did you do to study the costume look? Like, what did you find in the costumes of Star Wars that you wanted to bring into this moment, but what did you want to make fresh too? Like, because I mean, Star Wars has a long history of some of the most gorgeous costume design.
Yes. Yeah. So first of all, I am absolutely honored and thrilled and excited to be in the company of those designers. So that's like huge for me and very gratifying. And one of the things what I did, looking sort of backwards, forwards to the show, because as you know, our story, The Acolyte, is sort of like a prequel before what we know as a body, as a canon of Star Wars. So what I took from that is to integrate into my design for the viewers and the fans, was that a factor that they recognize, an element, an essence. But because I didn't have the historical constraints, the thread of constraints of this happened and this happened and this happened, I was that sort of ahead of the curve. I wanted to bring in some new design approaches, but I think I did. And one of the things is I like color, and I think I amped that up when you look back at most of the Star Wars episodes and films, and also the comics too. They work within a very narrow color palette. And on the Acolyte, I was blessed to be able to open that up and use color. For me, color is something that is one of my work tools in my own personal design workbox. So I reached for that. Then also shifting away into, how would I put this? Ancient global cultures. We do know that George Lucas, really drew on the ancient Japanese samurai culture. Leslie and also George Lucas also influenced in terms of storytelling by Kurosawa. So those were kind of like my foundational design inspirations. And then I went further afield into Africa and Asia Minor, Pacific Islands. I mean, just old warrior, ancient, I would say old, ancient cultures that we know, and pulled elements from them. Rome, Byzantine. I just went on this historical trip, and just got influenced by those cultures and integrated it into my design aesthetic of what I thought this world, this pre-world of Star Wars could be.
One of the things that your costumes on the Acolyte did really well, like astonishingly well, was actually help tell the story of each of the characters, but also help tell some of the story of what we're supposed to be feeling. I want to say sort of one of the moments that struck me the most was the moment when the stranger is sort of getting into the pool and he's all shrouded in black and he takes that off and he sort of has this baptism and comes back out and puts on white. And you talked about playing with color in those ways and telling story in those ways. How do
Yes.
you approach that? Like, what are some of those things that you brought to the table that way with the costuming? Because it was astonishing how much story that you could communicate with just the costumes that I received as a viewer.
Thank you for that. I think in the world of entertainment and storytelling, in the modern way that we receive entertainment and storytelling, we've really kind of moved away from books, and we're now into this digital world. One of the things that I did do is really, how do I explain this to you? A costume designer, a good costume designer, skilled costume designer is supposed to do that. Is supposed to be able to use the tools and her craft and help to not only frame the story with clothing, but also tell it. And I took that very seriously. I got a lot of guidance from Leslie, sort of like I pick her brain for some like ideas. And also a lot of times, as you know, when you're doing a television series, you don't get all 8 episodes at once. So a lot of times I was working forward with only maybe 3 episodes, which were sometimes drafts or outlines. which would drastically change, they can. And I had to kind of like, just go out on the far end of the springboard and go, okay, I think this is what's going to happen. And she would also give me some insight to, the eventuality of some of the characters. I'm glad and appreciate that you noticed the stranger Chimera's almost sort of baptism. And one of the reasons I did deliberately go from the dark of the Sith to the shedding and almost the light of Coruscant. I made that connection to maybe that's where he came from, So the simplicity of that shirt that he put on basically was, for me as a designer, was that he was stripping himself of the anger and the freedom and really getting to what he was really looking for. And it's tricky because costumes can unconsciously sway your storytelling one way or the other. And I think as a costume designer overall, I believe that oftentimes our craft is underlooked for the ability to do that. Because in everyday life, we do judge people, whether we like it or not. We do judge people by first appearance. We judge people subconsciously by what they're wearing, how they're wearing, because it's a form of expression. So, that's what, any designer, whether it's costume design or production design, that's what they should bring to the script and enhance it.
So in your view, what's the most important thing that a costume designer can do to let the audience know exactly who a character is?
Oh my gosh, there's so much they can do. Because, like I said before, clothing is clothing is its own book. It's its own book, it's its own script. And the idea is that you really have to have that concept in your head and also have the ability to merge it in what's on the page, and then to merge it into how your director colors what's on the page. So it's just words. You can say it's words, but those words you have to understand and pick up on tone. Things that I do, color, I work a lot with color, as I said, texture, weights of fabrics. For example, May's assassin robe, the color of it was purple. And why did I choose that color? Because it was a connection to her past. It was like what she remembered, what she was wearing, what her mother was wearing, what the community of the Brendock witches were wearing on that fateful night when she lost her family, her sister, her community. Everything was severed. So I took the color of the purple of the ascension and made it the cloak, almost like a protection for her as she goes, for bear on this, she's going to avenge what happened. And so she has a hit list. Basically, she's her own mercenary, her own assassin. So you can do things like color and texture to bring a certain type of aggressiveness into a costume, if that's what you want to do. Or conversely, as we just talked about Khmer, you can put purity and cleanliness and that baptismal, essence that scene brought into the Acolyte by going with lighter fabrics that move, that the human brain picks up as gentle and sympathetic. Does that make sense to you, what I'm saying?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And it seems like
Okay.
I had a chance to see May's assassin costume at the premiere because it was on display there. And
yes,
it was remarkable seeing it in person because there was so many. It was much more fabric, like more scraps of fabric almost.
yeah,
And it almost kind of felt that when you compare that to, again, going back to Khmer and the white shirt that he's got, where it's very simple and it's one piece almost. That
Mm-hmm.
she's much more fractured and unsure, with the way
Right.
the fabric is put together.
You
Um,
absolutely nailed it. Yes, because that's what I mean, she's of no fixed address. There's no assassin store for her to um go get her outfit. And so one of the things I did do is really collage. She's on this journey. And as you know, Leslie and I talked about it when I pitched the idea to her, because it was tricky. Like, where is she coming from? We don't know where she's coming from. We know where she's going. And what has her journey been before that? So I came up with this idea that she's like, her clothes should look a combination of a vagabond and a mercenary, so the breastplate shows that aggressiveness, and the cloak is made of different pieces of fabric, as you saw at the premiere. It's all patched together. And one of the things I did lighter, gauzier. It was like cottons and gauzes that we hand dyed, and then we put the lighter weight at the bottom of the cloak. And because what I wanted to happen is that as she's walking very vigorously into the noodle shop, I wanted to see the cloak flow behind her, but I didn't want to lose the hood. I didn't want the whole thing to come off. So what we did is I started with lighter fabrics in weight at the bottom. And by the time it got up to the shoulders and the hood, it was a heavier cotton that would stay on without any mechanical, attachments. But the back just flew away from her. It's like her past going away, and that aggressiveness in the front, right here, where the camera catches you, is fixed and focused. And also, the hood and the style and the shape of it is also like the flip side of the Jedi robes, like the famous mission robe. So
I
that's kind of how I came up with that idea.
there's something I think astonishing that I don't think people realize, like how complicated your job is, where you not only have to think about what's going to look good, but what's going to look good on camera and what's going to look good on camera in motion under the lights, and then
Yes.
what's going to tell the story. And so many of the costumes have this really great texture to them. They feel very
Mm-hmm.
textured, even when
Mm-hmm.
you're watching it on screen, but definitely when you see them in person. How do you approach making sure that that reads on camera? Like, what's your philosophy for that? Like, how do you approach that?
But there are a couple of practical things that I have to consider. Um, in addition to that list that you just made, I also have to think about, especially a show like The Acolyte, action. So you have Chimera, for example, The Stranger, layers and layers and layers. There's a Japanese hakama pant, and then there's that really stiff belt that really keeps them upright, and that X-shaped sort of tabard, and then on top of that, that cloak, and made out of leather, cowhide, and it's pretty heavy. And then on top of that, you have the mask. So visually, it's graphic and it's great. Practically, is it going to work with the wire work and the stunts? And that was that was always a continuing challenge and something to solve. Literally on almost all of the major characters' costumes, because they either fighting, running, flying in the air, lightsabers clashing. So all of those things have to make sense. And the next thing that I usually do is then the next step is to get it in a camera test. So with the DP and myself and a director, whichever particular episode we're doing, it's lit in very similar circumstances. That's how it's going to be on camera. And that for me is the acid test, because camera tests are usually done very, very close to the day of shooting. And if something's not firing right, I gotta quickly get it back to the, back. It may go back as far as back to my cutters. It might be something that I have to re-dye or recolor or recut, So it's once it's in the blocks, man, and I'm off.
Because that's, you mentioned that.
It's gotta deliver.
Because I'm thinking very specifically of Master Saul's Jedi robes, and
Yeah.
depending on the lighting that the DP is using, because I think the DP is telling a color story as well.
Yeah.
Especially if you think of episode 6, where the lights go off on the ship, and Saul's sort of shrouded in darkness, and he's captured May, and his Jedi robes, they're the same robes, but they take on a very sinister vibe to
Mm-hmm.
them. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
sort of balance what it's going to look like in one light and how it's going to look in a different
And
light.
in another, right, right. And then one of the things that helps with that, of course, is having some pre-knowledge from the DP. And then also texture changes differently and gets enhanced in light versus if it was like a flat woven linen or wool or silk. So all of the Jedi robes, Saul's and your Jackie's, all of the major guys have different textures. Looks like it's the same color, that honey mustard, which is also a first, that has never been seen in Star Wars before in the Jedi costumes, is that I did subtle textures and weaves in each of them. And also, believe it or not, I don't know how, I can't say to you like mathematically how I do this. It's sort of like the feel of when I look at a fabric and what it means to me and what I think it could say on my behalf. So it's sort of a gut feeling with some technical knowledge combined. Because basically that's what design is when you think about it, It's from in here and then having a base knowledge, of what works and what doesn't work. So it's like work things and education about your craft. And then what you bring your own personal perspective to, literally down to, I will sit there and I will finger and feel fabric while or whatever it is. Sometimes it's metal or leathers, whatever the material is, and kind of channel and think about that character, and in my head think about the illustration that the first step illustration that I made, and how is this gonna look on that.
One of the really astonishing feats that I think you pulled off with the costume design is that everything felt very Star Wars, but it also had this in the silhouettes sort of evocative of very historical sort of silhouettes. Like the witches, if you looked at the witches and their silhouettes, they looked sort of like classical witches that we would subconsciously sort of cue in on that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you approach that and sort of balance what it needs to look like with all the lights on, but also with that historical sort of subconscious silhouette? Is that subconscious to you as well? Is that something that you're working on purposefully?
It both, because I didn't want it to look like, you know, which is Halloween costume, pointy hat and dark. But at the same time, it had to have some subliminal notes that the viewer can pick up and go, I think these are witches. These women look powerful. And the first pass, I would think that and I would think that Leslie Headland would want not to have it so much on the nose. So I think the first time, I think as a viewer, I would hope that when they when they come across this community, even though they know that the Jedi saw the twins in the woods and spied on them and kind of made an assumption of what they were, the clothing, I didn't want it to look so, witchy, but they needed to look powerful. They needed to look shrouded. They needed to look different. And I did a lot of research to come up with these cloaks that you see them wearing, every day. And then also bringing it up into a higher level in the ascension, the night, that fateful night when everything really changed for the twins. It's again, essence, coming from inside and a lot of research. Like I did tons, when I first started, I have to share this with you, Brian. When you first start out to what you call world building, you don't get the complete world handed to you. So it comes with a script or ideas kind of piecemeal, and you have to kind of go along and build what you're building in tandem with, mainly for me would be like the production design, because that is so integral to where I place these costumes. I have to know that environment, whether it's, a speedster, a jail cell, Coruscant, Brendok, these planets that we never saw before. So there's a lot of collaboration that I communicate back and forth, not only with lighting, production designer, myself, fight choreography, very, very crucial. And come up with stuff that works for everybody. Very collaborative. And I would think that of all the projects that I've done, Star Wars it demands that more than any other show. And I've done some big shows, but the nature of ground build, just building from scratch, as opposed to shopping it in a department store or finding it in a thrift store or putting a thing together. Every single garment and costume has to be created. That's my dream, and I got it. I don't know what else to tell you. And I always felt that I always felt I could do this. I always wanted a project like this. I got it.
As you were working on the script and sort of coming up with the ideas for the costumes in the first place, what was the first costume that really came together in your head that came off that way on screen?
I was working simultaneously on 3 things at once because they were all gonna pop up in the first episode, and I had to kind of get past that. Let's see. It's sort of a bit of a tie. I would say the mech neck when Osha is in the Nemodian frigate, and I had to come up with what is that gonna be, and I didn't want it to look like anything that we had seen before in Star Wars, like hardcore, like, oh, that looks like this from from some other show. However, it needed to sell that she was this person that could fix these freighters and was very knowledgeable of tools and mechanics and all of that. So I came up with the idea of an aviator suit, like a flight suit, with an auto mechanic. And that was how I hybrided those 2 inspirations together. And then the one that really sealed it for me is the one that you saw at the premiere. May's assassin outfit. Yeah. those two. And because they're, and this show also, remember, I have one actress simultaneously playing two characters and trying to keep design wise and costume wise, trying to keep them divided and separate, even though it's Amanda Stenberg. So she would come into the fitting room and I would have to shift my head and go, that's May, or that's Osha.
With the Jedi robes, was that a
Mhm.
particular challenge? Because people sort of in their head go like, oh, I know what a Jedi looks like, right? To make them stand out, especially for the different situations. I'm thinking particularly Vernestra's sort of formal costume at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Was it a challenge to sort of read something that we all recognize because Star Wars has sort of been saturated in the popular culture for the last 45 years, but
Yeah.
different enough to feel as though it is removed from what we know.
Mm-hmm. Well, the advantage that I had again is that um, the connection wasn't so hard and fast because I had the benefit of time prior to, but I still had to adhere to the outline or base idea of what people know Coruscant looks like. But I did one major thing, and that was to insert that color tone, which, the Jedi do. But what I also did, though, not to take it too far afield, I kept the chocolate brown of the mission robes. And then for Vanessa, that last change was, I'm really proud of, I'm really proud of that costume because what I needed to do, and I think I was able to deliver it, is to kind of give it like senatorial because now she has to explain to the Senate what's been going on, and she's very duplicitous. So one of the things I did, and I think Leslie liked it, I liked it, was that because camera is just basically here, and she's got this really beautiful long gown and very senatorial, I did this band across, and if you notice, I put the Jedi symbols on each front, almost as if she was a 5-star general, for example. You would see, insignia somewhere to donate her rank and that she is not to be messed with. So that was one of the things that I did because I knew that it's story-wise, she was gonna be up against dear David Dorian Harewood's character. That is name right now to
The
slip me.
senator. Yeah.
The senator, yes. And that she was going to have to answer to him and navigate. So it had to be as strong as his. So the insignia was like, I'm in charge here, and I rank above you. I don't know if she really does, but she certainly acted like she did because she's accountable and she's, you know, duplicitous and hiding facts.
Yeah. As you were studying other Star Wars costumes, I mean, there's some of the great, I think, costume work in film. Is there
Mm-hmm.
a Star Wars costume that you studied as you were putting all these things together that still just sort of takes your breath away uh that you like just sort of as a fellow costume designer?
Well, I have to give kudos to Trisha Bigger's Phantom Menace. I was able to go up to San Francisco to Skywalker Ranch where all of the costumes, all of them are curated at the ranch. So it took me 2 days and I could have spent a week there and still it wouldn't have been enough, and was able to see Luke Skywalker's costume, um, Palantine, the Modians, and it was a costume design of Trisha Biggers that just blew me away. Just collectively, because there were so many of them, and the detail that she put into those costumes. And unfortunately, sometimes we're talking about how lighting is important. Sometimes you may embellish something or do a special small detail, which also adds, to the costume, and the camera may not pick it up because the shot is far away, or it was tight, or, it was a drive-in shot. So many things that you're just gonna go, look, I got to do this from head to toe and put everything that I have into it. So her costumes overall for the Phantom Menace were just blew me away. All of them.
Yeah, no, did that get it sounds like you were able to draw some inspiration there, especially for the Senate stuff when you had to
Yes.
costume the senators there.
Yes. I was able to see, how she draped things and the volume. I don't think I would have picked up on the volume and some of the design construction had I just watched film. I wouldn't have picked it up. To see it and touch it and really lift it up, turn it inside out, examine it. I mean, some of this stuff that individually the human eye may not have registered individually, but overall it's like a painting, and you'll do red and you do the all the primary colors, but it's the way that you mix it that will make it different from any other painting that you ever saw. The thing that makes it great, and kudos to her. It was very educational for me and inspirational at the same time.
Is this sort of the first thing you worked on where the costumes are going to get archived like that? I mean, they're on display right now at Comic-Con as we're talking, and
I know. I wish I could be there. I'm actually right now in Las Vegas, and I'm working on Vince Gilligan's new show. But this is actually the second time I'll have something archived, because I did the last season of Breaking Bad. And some of those costumes, the meth yellow overall, I understand that's in the Smithsonian. And Jesse's and Bryan Cranston's, Walter White's costumes, last final bits from season 5, they're archived by Sony. So yeah. And I hope that a little further down the line, Bob Odenkirk's crazy suits might get archived too. It's such a departure, but those are like small individual pieces. But no, nothing I've done, this scope and this breadth, like for the Acolyte, everything will be archived, as opposed to some of the shows where I've done where keynote pieces are. Big difference.
Was Chimere's costume always sleeveless, or was that informed by Manny's arms?
Oh, I couldn't cover those up. They're awesome. And also, he needed, even though I had that very heavy leather cloak that we cut from, like, I don't know, 6 skins of cowhide to make it circular and to make it have the centrifugal thing. When he spins, it kind of moves away from him. He had so much wire work and physicality that we needed to kind of open up the sides, but at the same time keep him cloaked so you couldn't really tell who you were looking at. So that in that instance, I would say it was practicality needed for the garment, and also the physicality of you working with the body, and you see that this particular part of this individual's body is like, whoa, then you want to make his arms enhance my look, and vice versa. Everybody's crazy, gone crazy over the stranger's costume. I saw one of the producers sent me a link. There are already cosplay sites on Facebook, and they're trying to figure out what the fabrics are, how it's made. It's kind of bright. It's kind of blowing my mind.
That's
You
Star
know,
Wars.
I've been reading it. It's Star Wars, I know, and I'm reading their conclusions of what they think it is, and I want to go, no, it's leather. No, it's wool. No, it's metal. But I can't say anything. I can't say anything. Because then they would bombard me.
Yeah.
So so some of them nail it, and some of them just go off on their own tangent, which is also fantastic because it's also flattering to see how other people interpret or reinterpret your creation, your design. So I can't wait for Star Wars Celebration next year to see what these cosplay people come up with. They're just amazing.
Yeah. No, it's always astonishing to see like the amazing costume work that happens in Star Wars, but then how fans actually bring that to conventions. It's shocking me. Especially some of those senatorial gowns of Padme's or whatever from Phantom Menace, seeing people walking around with those, I'm just like, how did you have the time to do that?
Yeah,
It's amazing.
It's crazy. Did you go to Comic-Con? Are you in New York or
I didn't go
LA?
to
Where are you?
Comic-Con this year. I'm in Salt Lake City actually, so I'm even further away from Comic-Con than you are. But
Right. Yeah.
but I'll be at Star Wars Celebration, and I'm in all the Star Wars celebrations, so it's always astonishing to see that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I look at someone and I go, "Oh my God, that looks better than what I did."
With having worked on film sets and stuff, film sets can sometimes be exhausting or miserable, but it sounds like as you're talking, like you had a lot of fun on this. Is there a
Yes,
particular
I
moment?
did.
Is there a particular moment where you, in the course of your job, where it didn't necessarily just feel like work, it just felt like you having fun?
When the actor walks on set with something that I created and fit. It fit in the environment. It fits on the body. It fits on the screen. And I think two things kind of gave me, like butterflies in my stomach when I saw it what we call establishing a costume. The first time it works on camera, even after camera tests and all that, when it's actually on the actor and it's action. I would say Chimeras and Maze Assassin. I was like, I did that.
It was,
It was just a really great sense of satisfaction and achievement put together. I think that kind of is what gives people, for me, it gives me butterflies. I just marvel that I did it, pulled it out of my ass, and it worked.
it seems like May's assassin costume is one of those iconic costumes in Star Wars now, even after this short period of time. I mean, it was one of the first images we saw at Star Wars Celebration in London. And it's sort of permeated all of the marketing, and it's so much of a standout. It seems like it's already sort of made its way into that Star Wars.
It has. I think it has. Both, I would say, out of all the pieces that I did, I would say that one somehow just registered and just really just shot up the charts. I think that and The Stranger, those two.
What was the most difficult costume to put together?
Hmm. When you say put together, you mean to construct or to conceive?
To conceive. I mean, like, you're also working with uh aliens in some cases, right? Which is not necessarily something that you've
Done
done
before,
before,
right?
or things like that.
Right.
Like, so there's different considerations there. What did you find to be the biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge was, huh, it, we had a couple. I would say actually, oh, I know what it was. You don't see it for a long time, but it was Philip and OSHA's spacesuits when they go out on a frigate. I had a lot of things to consider, which made it challenging. And I remember that the space suit needed to not just look fantasy, it needed to look like in the real world it would function. And I remember having to, and I hadn't done this research in the prep of the show. It came up a little bit closer to shooting that episode. And I remember I had to do like a quick study on the evolution of spacesuits, Russian ones, Sputnik, NASA, and started to like take some of the elements. And then I remember the helmet um, needed to be, the visor needed to be wide enough that when she turned her head sideways, you didn't see metal, you wanted to see full face. And in actuality, visor, space helmets have a much smaller field of vision. So that was challenging. I went through quite a few until we came up with one that, for camera had a much wider clear sheet, the clear vinyl piece, the plastic piece, the front, the visor, and then also the fit on Amanda's head. And then I had to consider the wig. And then we lit it from inside. So it took a lot of technical know-how, pardon, took a lot of technical know-how. And then from the spacesuit itself, we had to figure out, a backpack on the back, like the jetpack, and it had to look like, air hoses, oxygen came in, waste came out. Everything had to look very, very functional. So that I think took the most it took the most study from me because I was working with materials that I wasn't familiar with working in one costume.
Is there a material you got to work with on this that's sort of unexpected, that you wouldn't have expected to ever, or that no one watching it would go like, oh, why would I think that that's incorporated into that costume?
Two things, and there are actually accessory pieces. One is the Mother Anisea, played by Jodie Turner-Smith. I found in London a one-of-a-kind African copper armband, so it went from wrist to elbow. And it was only one. And it was truly, it wasn't like airport art. It was real. It was very, very old. And it was one set. And I really wanted it on a costume. But as it was, as an antiquity, it wasn't flexible. She wouldn't be able to work with it because it was copper, it was somewhat heavy. And I had a 3D department within a costume department, which is great. And these guys molded it, refabricated it, and did some 3D printing and made various copies in different materials. Like the rubber one was for stunts, and then the different densities and thicknesses and firmness of the rubber. And then it was kind of plated. And when I put it next to the antique copper cuffs from Africa, you could hardly tell the difference. That was pretty cool. And the next thing that I had to come up with and literally create was the stranger's cortosis arm. And we literally made it, we made it from scratch. And I did a lot of research. We're talking, about the texture. And so I took inspiration from lava and certain rock formations. And again, the 3D department, we just worked with this thing, and it needed to look corroded, but it needed to look strong and threatening. And he also, like Jodie Turner-Smith, had to work with this. And so when you, again, putting these things together, it has to function. It has to function. It can't break, it can't snap, it can't restrict their movements. So the helmet, the space helmet was a challenge. And the cortosis was like a real creation, a challenge in creation. It came out great. And the copper cups are, from Africa that we replicated rather.
We talked a lot about the Jedi and the Senate and those sort of costumes that people sort of know instinctively, but the Sith in this look a little different than we're expecting Sith typically to look like. How did you approach that?
Some guidance from Leslie. She was like, I don't want him to be revealed too soon. So again, that I did a lot of versions of him until we came up with something that appealed to her and appealed to what the character had to do. And at the same time, I couldn't have it look, we didn't want it to look like Darth Vader, Darth Maul. We didn't want to make such a strong connection, but to just make an essence. It was cloaked, you couldn't see space. It has some design elements that are in common with those Sith characters, but I don't think it was like a dead giveaway.
Yeah, no, it felt, again, one of those subconscious sort of cues. Like if you were to black out his costume when he's wearing the helmet, it does give a little bit of that Kylo Ren sort of vibe, where it's there's that light underneath, but the darkness on the outside.
Exactly. Again, like we had said before, is because there's Star Wars is what I think it is like the largest franchise ever, right? In continuum. So it's like this massive library and people who are just so knowledgeable, and you can double check and fact check every single thing. But the challenge for the Acolyte was to take advantage of the time span that it had, but still have connectivity to the stories and the characters that we already know in the galaxy. So it was to me, I think my overall design challenge is, how do you make it different, but not cookie cutter, so that the fan base can go, oh, that's the bad guy, that's this, that's that, and that's the one from that. It was, for me, I had to kind of like not sever the chain, but put enough nicks in it that the fans would have to think about the origins of the character. And of course, the writing, did that even better than what I do.
Because I think this show's a little bit more complicated than when you look at the Skywalker saga. George Lucas was very much like, this is very black and white. We're making this for 12-year-olds, and it's very much like these folks have masks, so they're the bad guys.
Bad guys,
And
yeah.
and these folks all have faces, so they're the good guys, and that's about as complicated as it gets. But in this, there's so
Hmm.
much more depth and complication behind everyone's motivations and what's going on and why people are
Yes,
doing things. And so it felt very much like that came out in the costumes.
I think it did, and thank you for saying that. I just feel that for my design aesthetic, I absolutely respected the canon and it did the what Star Wars brought before, but I think my mandate was also to present something fresh. It's like a recipe that but everybody can make that recipe slightly different, change the seasoning, and it's macaroni and cheese, but your grandmother made it different from your mom, from your auntie, from how you make it, but it's still kind of macaroni and cheese. So that's kind of a little bit of an analogy I would say to that question, how I would answer that question. I don't know if it makes sense, but
No, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. Having been on the other side of it now, having gone through, climbed that mountain, um,
yeah.
is it a mountain you'd climb again? Is Star Wars something, is
Oh
it too
my God.
intimidating?
Is the sky blue?
Okay.
Hello. Yes,
Well,
I would in a heartbeat. Yeah.
I
I
imagine it's
really
not
hope, and I
often.
hope we get that chance. I really
Yeah,
do. I really would like to see. I hope we get to go deeper into this story. I really do.
me too. Me too. Especially with where it ended. I'm dying.
Yes. Yes. What an amazing cliffhanger.
Yeah. Um, Last question. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. And you've been so generous with it, and this has been such a great conversation. What is it
Thank
that
you,
you
sir.
would like people to know about costume designers, specifically costume designers in Star Wars, though, but like just the job of costume designing and like how it helps tell stories, like how you're a storyteller as much as Leslie or the actors or the DP. Um, how would you communicate
Yeah,
that?
I would love to let people know. I think our skills and our craft as a whole to the viewer tends to be undervalued. And I have a theory why that is. I think it's because everybody gets up in the morning and they put on clothes and they think, okay, and anybody can do that. And I I I feel that the viewers, I would love them to kind of get a glimpse. The cosplayers get it because they're doing what I do in their own through their own eyes. But the average viewer, the average fan that's, watch Mandalorian, watch this, watch that, I don't think that they are aware of the levels of work that we go through. I mean, just thinking, like what I just said before, when I was faced with having to create this spacesuit, I had to go and make a quick study of the evolution of real spacesuits that, you know, Cape Canaveral, the Russians, like I was saying before, and look at every single one and come to some kind of, draw design from it. We do a lot of um, history. We know, I think we have to come with as much history and background and backstory to what a character is going to wear as much as the writer who wrote the script. And I think a lot of times we kind of get, I'd say, left in the dust. And I'm not saying it with any kind of rancor. I'm just saying it out of, oh, you've been in this business. You're right. You know how sometimes we just don't get the level of exposure and appreciation, I think, as we should. It comes to the viewer subliminally, but in terms of just being out there, you know, in the pecking order of design and production, I think we're kind of the unsung heroes.
Very much so. Very much so. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. This has
Thank you,
been
Brian.
terrific. I always learn so much doing these.
Thank you. And I hope I get to meet you in the flesh.
At some point, if you're going to be at Star Wars Celebration, I'll be there. So hopefully
Yes.
they've got some season 2 announcements or something.
Oh, God, yes. Yes. I really hope so.
Me too.
Okay,
me too.
you have a fantastic afternoon, and thank you for such insightful questions. You really made me stop and think real hard. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Hopefully it wasn't hard in a bad way.
No, hard in a good way. I mean, like, you know, kind of like I had to kind of go down into myself and think about your questions and your answers. So yeah, thank you.
I'm glad to hear that. Part of my process for doing interviews is going and reading a whole bunch of other interviews that people have done to see if I can get something else.
Don't ask those questions. Right,
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, you did that. You accomplished that.
Okay. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.
So yeah, that was a lot of fun, and learned a lot of really interesting stuff there. I was really kind of blown away by some of the stuff she talked about, and I want to thank Holly for some of the questions she provided me for that. And if you want to find me this weekend, I'll be at Gen Con. You can find me as ever at swankmatron.com or on social media at swankmatron. And as far as Full of Sith goes, you can find Full of Sith at fullofsith.com. The entire back catalog of episodes are available there at fullofsith.com. You can send us an email at holocron@fullofsith.com. And we'd love to hear from you. We always do. And, you know, be sure to rate and review the show wherever it is you listen to it. So for super producer Mike Pilot and for Holly Fry, I'm Brian Young, and the Force will be with you always.
Sir, if you'll not be meeting me, I'll close down for a while.